Hello everyone and welcome back to the video series on the special education reform and its unintended consequences. This is the video number 6 in the series, and as I always say, if you want to find out more or you have any questions or comments, please feel free to refer to the free private Facebook group and you can reach out to me there. Or we can, talk about it. You can comment. You can ask me questions right in the comments after the video. Today, as I promised, we're going to talk about one of the key provisions of the Special Education Law, PL 94-142, which ensured many different key issues or key factors in the education of our children with disabilities. So what happened with the special education reform in a nutshell was that it kind of misinterpreted a lot of the key provisions of the idea or the PL 94-142, the law that protects our children's education. And it made it seem like it meant something that was not provided for in its original intent. So I feel that in order to understand exactly what the law stands for, the best thing to do is to dissect all these provisions, especially the main provisions of the law. And once we dissect the main provisions of the law, we will see how the special education reform did not live up to what it was supposed to do or what it was supposed to help with in regards to the education of our children. So one of the most important provisions of the special education law is the provision of a free, appropriate public education. And what this means is that your child is entitled, just like any other child, anybody, to receive an education that is free, that is appropriate, and that it's public. And that's really, really important because it says that an education for your child should cost you nothing. It should be free. It should be appropriate. They can't just put you anywhere and say, hey, look, here, we're providing you with an education. It's free. They can't say that if it's not appropriate to your child. And it has to be public. So you have to be able to access public schools just like anyone else, just like any one of your child's peers. So this is an important provision, the provision of FAPE, the provision of free, appropriate public education. And we can go into detail as to what that means, because what it means is really, really particular to your child. But just keep in mind that just the fact that it's free doesn't cut it. It has to be free and appropriate. It has to be appropriate to whom? To your child in particular. Another key provision of the special education law is that the education should be provided in the least restrictive environment. And we talked about this quite extensively in the last few videos, but what it means is that you can't just place a child in the placement continuum. You can't just go for something that's super restrictive for your child. You have to try less restrictive environments first. And what you try first should be, again, appropriate for your child. I get a lot of questions about this all the time, and here is where there's a lot of confusion, because usually what's least restrictive tends to be assumed to be general education all the time. And is it the least restrictive environment all the time? Absolutely not. What is least restrictive is what is least restrictive for your child. Remember, the education has to be free and appropriate for your child, not for anybody else. General education may be least restrictive for a particular child, but maybe not for yours. Maybe for your child, a 12 to 1-to-1 environment is the least restrictive and appropriate educational environment. So one takeaway key point to remember about this is that FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education, and LRE, Least Restrictive Environment, should be tailored to you, to your family, and to you, the educational needs of your child. They cannot be dictated by someone who says, but the least restrictive environment is always this type of class or that type of class. No, it really has to do with the educational needs of your child. And one thing to remember is I see this in all kinds of ways. I've seen this where people say general education is the least restrictive environment for every child. To a degree, in a very general sense, it is. But is it for your child? Not necessarily. And I see it on the other side of the spectrum too, where maybe a hospital setting or a residential setting is the least restrictive environment for a particular child. And these families are forced to try something that is definitely not the least restrictive for their child in particular. They're forced to try maybe a specialized school environment where that wouldn't be restrictive enough. It wouldn't be the least restrictive environment for that child. So it happens in all kinds of ways in every part of that placement continuum. So just something to really keep in mind and take into account is that these two key provisions are very much tailored to your family and the needs of your child. But what happens when you feel that your child's rights in FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education, or LRE, Least Restrictive Environment, are not being accommodated, right? They have to be by law, right? So there is the key provision in special education law. There are these two key provisions, actually, that ensure that your child should be serviced in the least restrictive environment, and a free appropriate public education should be delivered to your child. What happens when these are not done? Well, this is where another key provision of the law comes into play, and that is parental rights. Parental procedural due process rights for parents. And what this ensures is that you not only have a say in the type of education that your child receives, and that evaluation in that meeting is tailored to you and your family's needs, but you also can say when you do not agree with something that was recommended or done for your child, and you can call an impartial hearing where somebody that's a neutral party, it could be an impartial hearing officer or it could be a judge, will sit and look at the documents that are being presented and will judge whether it's in the teams, and I should say in the professionals that were part of the team or the school or the district favor or your favor, okay? But you can bring this up into a local district. You can bring this up to the state. You can go all the way up to the Supreme Court if you must. But you have due process rights, and you can bring this up and you can fight if this is not done, if you feel in the best interest, in the best educational interest of your child. So the key takeaways from this video today are going to be three important provisions, right, of the educational law. That your child should be serviced in the free, he or she has a right to a free, appropriate public education that should be delivered to your child. Number two, that he or she should be educated in the least restrictive environment, and that these two provisions are tailored to your child, no one else, just your child. And the third, and I think the most important one, is that you as a parent have due process rights. And what it means is that when you feel that these two other provisions are not being delivered for your child, you can bring it up to that team, you can bring it up to the school's administration, you can bring it up to the district or whoever you need to bring it up to, keep a record of what you're doing, and you can tell them that you do not agree with the provisions of either the IEP, or that you don't agree with the actual delivery of services. You can say, my child's IEP says this, but this is what's being delivered, and I don't agree with this. This is not the least restrictive environment for my child. This is not an appropriate education as it is provided for my child in the special education law. So this is very, very important, and it's something that you have to keep in mind. And you remember that you are the voice of your child. Many, many times our children can't say what is the best for them, and you have to, take control of the situation, and you have to speak for your child. You have to fight for your child's rights, and you have to do what's best for them. And what's best for them is the best for you and your family. If you have any questions regarding this or anything else that we have spoken about, please leave me a comment. If you are not in the free private group, please join our group. I will leave a link here if you're watching this on YouTube. And just talk to us, talk to me. Let me know if there are any questions or concerns that I can address in private for you. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.